Top 5 rogue decks for July 2022 that I would consider taking to the WCQ or the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship. Like 30% of you guys have not smashed the living crap out of that subscribe button. Smash it so we can climb up the 100k ladder. Yes, I know I haven't talked about Drytron, ABC Thorian. All of those are like floating around like 6 and 7 best decks in the format. That does not mean that they're not good decks, alright? I just don't want to talk about them because I wanted to condense this series and talk about Rogue instead of going into the sub patch here. So, number 1 on the list here is going to be Marincess, whatever you want to pronounce it, so we have a checklist of mispronounced words going on here. Now, so Marincess is that really fun deck that came out of the Ocean Duelist pack, or Legendary Duelist of the Trash, and a lot of players have looked at this deck and they're like, I don't want to play this. This feels like garbage. And then they go to locals, they play against it, and they're like, oh my god, it's so good. Well, here's the thing. Reading is your friend. A lot of players, and I will tell you, out of the Italian Nationals, the one thing I heard from a lot of players that played against this deck was, I didn't know what to do. So this is what we call the case of a meta pick. If players don't know the matchup, players don't know the value and crazy developments that a deck can do, you can catch a lot of players off guard. And that's actually your main advantage here with this deck. It's going to be a lot of, I guess, big advantage trees with some of the things here. So when you look at Marincess as a deck, understand that it's basically protect the Battle Ocean effectively. They climb up, they make Aqua Argonaut, they create these huge boss monsters, and the deck loses to Nibiru. It's about the general consensus I've heard across the board for this deck. Even though, yes, Nibiru is running around in the format right now, it does hurt this deck a lot. It can still do some pretty cool plays, but overall, you still lose to Nibiru, but it's a really cool rogue pick to catch players off guard, and that's the most important thing when looking at stuff in this video is unprepared players will lose to things like Marincess, for sure. Next up here on our list is going to be Libromancer. Now, I still don't know two craps about how this deck functions after watching the MBT, stuff a while back, coming out of the Brazil Nationals where we saw 2 of this deck top. I've seen some builds that are playing Drytron shenanigans. I've seen, this deck replace half the base combo in it and play a synchro package. I've seen so much with Libromancer that I don't have an answer for you as to what the best variant of this is. But as of making this video, I will tell you that there are a lot of players that will continue to pick up this deck, give it a shot, and just have a lot of fun with it overall. I think that's the coolest thing to kind of note with this overall is the fact that unknown preparedness is a very good thing. But in terms of taking this package and merging it with the base stuff for the one list that's been kind of floating around here, it's actually kind of interesting to see the cool crazy ideas that players can come up with here and try to combine and have success with. And I think that's the coolest thing with Libromancer as a package when you get down to it is pretty synergizable across the board, all right? They didn't do some toxic stuff that they've done in the past with these engines, but I think they did a really particular good job with this set overall of things, just to make sure that you could kind of good stuff them in other decks. And that becomes a lot of the problems with some of the other archetypal stuff is you'll have you can't do X after this effect. And that's something that they definitely made sure that they tried to check a little bit more of the Libromancer stuff for a little bit easier synergy. So, yes, your Libromancer toolbox is going to be an option tree for you. I would definitely give it a shot out here in the long run. I think you'll have fun. Next up here is going to be Salamangreat. Now, this isn't really, I guess, truly a rogue pick, but it's the most rogue of top picks that I would think, besides, Drytron, BW, things like that. So the thing with Salad is this deck still does a couple things. It can do the transcode talker, access code OTK, which is pretty much its primary win con. And it can do something that a lot of other decks kind of wish that they could do. It can go second, and it can play Desires. Now, actually, the interesting thing with this is every successful deck that I have covered on this channel for Salamangreat, minus 1 or 2 of them, have cut Desires from the mold, which is very, very interesting to me because Desires was always such a go-to card for this deck. But I guess that changes like the way you fundamentally deck build, because that means you don't have to play additional copies of Roar and Rage in case you banish one. And because, something like Gazelle is limited, if you have to slap down your, starter and attempt to start through Desires, you don't risk that loss of the Gazelle. And I think that that's a very double-edged sword, in my opinion. It's definitely interesting overall for how this deck is constructed, but right now, I think Salad is by far one of the more interesting rogue picks. The problem with it is, when it gets broken apart, it gets broken apart. Like, this deck gets punched really hard by better combo extender decks, such as Sword Soul, right? Like, Sword Soul gives this deck a very unfun time, and it has trouble trying to recover from those sorts of things. Even Eldritch, at the end of the day, is better than Salamangreat. But that unknown factor, once again, I guess, is what you're kind of going for with this regard. I mean, like I said, Drytron, Eldritch, VW, ABC are all better picks than this, but the point of this is surprise factor and catching players off guard. All right, next up here is Ocean Control. This is what I'm going to call the Leviathan Special. Now, for those of you that don't know, the Water Duelist pack gave us some of Mako's coolest cards, and I mean some of the coolest. And in that set, we got a Searcher. Thank you, Fish Sonar. We got a Negate. Thank you for the power of the amazingness for that deck. Oh my god, it's so good to have a Negate finally. A Bouncer, and the Floodgate monster itself. Who doesn't love the fact that you basically drop Legendary Ocean on the field, you look your opponent straight in the eyes and go, what are you gonna do? The answer is they can't really do anything. Like, that's your big advantage when you're playing this deck is a Floodgate monster that says both players can only control a water monster really messes up your opponent's game plan. Yes, they can impermit and turn it off, yeah, but if they've already established a big field and this thing comes down, they have to fulfill the condition before they can negate it. Alright, so that's the biggest thing. Unless Skill Drain's already face up in the field in that case. Well, outside of that, Water Control basically gives you access to some pretty cool extra deck options too. You can, Bahamut Shark, totally awesome. Your opponent do some of those more interesting, fun plays that we've all become very accustomed to with the Water Control deck. Alright, you gotta love Water Toolbox shenanigans. And then the other thing is you get access to level 3s too, because Legendary Ocean actually level mods your level 4s down to level 3s. Because everything gets minus a star, which means you can actually normal summon Mr. Kyrish in here. Oh, and then you get all the Sea Stealth attacks too, which gives you levels of interruption through the opponent. And then your opponent's just like, what in the world is going on here? Like, what am I supposed to do about this BS? Well, the answer is you're not supposed to do anything. You're supposed to just, let the high tides do what they're doing best. All right. And the last thing I want to talk about here is Punk Stun. You guys saw this deck show up on this channel, and a lot of people are like, what? So basically, you use the Adventure package as a base bone to basically do a Mono Awano shenanigans. Did you know that the Mono Awano can't bounce back to your hand because you can't apply the effect because you activated Rite of Armisia in the same turn? Bet you didn't. Alright, that's some real shenanigans right there. You also get access to, the Punk package for emergency teleporting out monsters, which means that you can get some searches for some interactions. Also means that we can drop or tribute fodder for Vanity's Fiend with a Griffin Rider sitting next to it, or you can establish a Fossil Dynapachycephalo that can basically power down everything that your opponent has by 500 through the Papillion equip to make sure that your stuff doesn't go anywhere. Did you catch all that? Because that's a lot. All right, it's a much different breed of stun deck than we're very used to seeing conventionally. It's almost like a Mausoleum-esque control deck, but 100% less Mausoleum and a little bit more consistency enablers through the good stuff dot cards, which once again I think is some of the better end stuff right now in the game. Is all these good stuff that can work on the baseline flip side of things and actually allow it to be counterpoints. Actually pretty good. So what do you guys think about the top 5 rogue picks. And like I said, I know Drytron, all of these other good decks exist right now, but I just wanted to kind of mention these because I think these are very important. When we do an actual tier list, we'll talk about all this. Please, comment down below, tell me what you guys think. Make sure you guys smash the living crap out of that subscribe button. I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.